Take me to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to the podcast.
Hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are wrapping up our last recording session here in Costa Rica for the season. And then for the next, by the time you hear this, we will have been in the States for a few months, but we were recording this beginning of July, and then we're heading to the States to visit family during the peak of the rainy season here in Costa Rica, where I won't be running surf camps during that time. So Sarah is excited to go visit everyone.
Yes, excited to escape the jungle fever. I don't know. It's not island fever. Costa Rica is not an island, but you know, when you're in some place for a really long time, I kind of get antsy and ready to leave and go visit family and friends. So super excited for that. And today's interview, we made it through. Poor Chase is a little stuffy with a little cold, but
Stella was on a roll when she first started preschool.
Oh, yeah.
She was getting all the germs and then passing them to Sarah and I. And we were
clear for a good 3 months, I feel like.
Yeah, we were pretty good.
But of course, right before we, travel and we're busy, Stella's got a little cold. So of course we get that a little bit, but we made it through today's interview, and we're excited to have Linda and Charlie Bloom back on the show. We interviewed them, I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 years now, and they're an awesome couple. They've been married since 1972. They're trained psychotherapists and relationship counselors, and have worked with couples, individuals, groups, and organizations since 1975. So they know a lot about relationships.
Yeah, it's awesome that they're in the work of psychotherapy and they have a 50-year marriage. So they, what do they say? They walk the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah. Talk the walk the talk. Something like that.
Something like that. But, and a lot of great knowledge in today's episode about why we shouldn't expect all of our needs to be fulfilled from our partner, and how to navigate codependency, and a lot of great information on something that's probably pretty common in a lot of relationships. So check that out. And as always, we love getting feedback from you guys, joining the Love Tribe group on Facebook. Check that out, and leaving those 5-star reviews on iTunes. It really helps us grow the podcast, which helps us attract more sponsors, which allows us to continue to put this on, because as we've mentioned before, it takes quite a bit of work that we love doing, but particularly Sarah is the one in the editing bay, messaging guests, getting people on the show, and updating the website, show notes, you name it, she is making it happen. So if we can get sponsors that can help us pay a nanny to watch Stella so she's not yelling in the background or when she's in school, and all the things that allow us to produce this show that we love to produce. So thank you for leaving those reviews and supporting our sponsors. We only put sponsors on whose products we believe in. A lot of times we use those products, and if they pass on a discount to you guys, then that's awesome and it sounds interesting. Use it, try it for free a lot of times, and know that it is helping us put on this show.
So we hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Today's show is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship. Create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days. We've collaborated with 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients. To unlock a special offer only for I Do Podcast listeners, visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. That's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Hi, Charlie and Linda. Welcome back to the show.
So glad to be with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Today, we are going to zero in and talk about the myth that our partner is going to fulfill all of our emotional needs. I was under the impression that Sarah was just going to do everything. And apparently that is just not true. And we have come to find that in our relationship. And we really want to just dive right into this because I think it's such an important realization that our partner is not going to fulfill all of our needs, all of our emotional needs. So let's deconstruct that and talk about how we can navigate this area of conflict. Why do we feel like our partner should be fulfilling all of our needs?
Well, that's a great question. And I'd like to back it up just a little bit to a more primary question, which is, what is it exactly that is the problem with having this expectation? And why is it that so many of us have it in the first place? What we've noticed in the work that we've been doing, and we've been doing it with individuals and couples for a few decades, that over time, it seems that an increasing percentage of couples who have trouble seem to opt to leave the relationship rather than invest more time and energy into it. And I kind of liken that to the whole idea of planned obsolescence, where when I was a kid and things broke down, we repaired them if we could, or we called in a repairman and we replaced parts, and we worked on it. And as you probably know, that these days that's not so much the rule; that's the exception. Most of the time, if it's broken, then you don't fix it; you just get rid of it and then replace it. And that same attitude is prevalent in an awful lot of relationships, where people seem to expect that the other person should be providing for their needs and for the needs of the relationship. And when they don't, rather than ask the right questions and really look at, well, what do we need to do here to fix this? There's this tendency to make the assumption that, well, we're just not a good fit. And because if we were, I wouldn't be dissatisfied with you and you wouldn't be disappointed with me. So it's best to just kind of call it quits and move on to something or somebody else. So that is the whole idea, that one person should be able to provide, if you have the right person, for the needs that you have, is the problem. It's that myth, that illusion, that when we really love each other, when two people really love each other deeply, then they won't need to take care of themselves in the same way. They won't need to rely on friends so much. They won't need to invest in other kinds of relationships, because this relationship is going to provide for all of that. So, we're going to talk a little bit more, a little later about what kinds of problems that can run into and how to deal with that if you notice that you have that expectation, which many people do. But I just wanted to kind of raise that whole issue of why it is that it's so important that we do begin to challenge this belief.
Why do you think so many people have that mindset of just, moving on instead of investing time into the relationship to fix it? Because when I look at my grandparents' generation, for example, there's a lot of those couples that have been married for, 50 plus years. And it seems that they had that mindset of, sticking it out and putting that work into the relationship to make it work. And now, obviously, in current day, our divorce rate is over 50%. So where do you think that mindset has kind of shifted to just moving on to a next relationship versus investing the time into the current one?
Well, I think that there's been a strong trend going back to the 60s where there was more freedom to make choices to leave a bad relationship. And I think that's a good thing. when women started to enter the workforce and were economically self-sufficient, they didn't have to stay in marriages that were really awful. And at about the same time, there was a loosening of the religious sanctions and community sanctions that made you bad and wrong for being a divorced person. And I think that that's a good thing, that there is more freedom of choice. But I think it's too much of a good thing that people, when they hit a rough spot in their partnership, too frequently bail when it is only a rough passage where they're learning something important about themselves and the other person, maybe tolerance, maybe acceptance, maybe some dark part of themselves they're projecting on the other person, maybe the lack of skills of negotiating for their needs or being emotionally honest. And we see a lot of people giving up on a relationship that has tremendous potential when they hit a hard place. And those couples that you're talking about, like your grandparents, Charlie and I are one of those couples. We've been together 50 years.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Yes, and we're really happy together, but we did have some times when the relationship was at risk. And both of us are so glad that we didn't bail out, because we used all of that crappy stuff during that time as compost to bloom out of. And we learned so much in that process. So we try to encourage the couples in trouble who come to us to let their imagination be big, let their expectations be high, but pony up some intentionality to cause it and to take responsibility for being the change agent that will allow that breakdown to become a breakthrough rather than a breakup.
If someone listening is having a breakdown and they're feeling like their needs aren't being met, how do we distinguish between an area where we need to find that within ourselves? Maybe that's something we have to work on, that we shouldn't feel we need to get that kind of love from our partner, whatever it is. How do we distinguish between that and that it's actually our partner that does need to come on board and help? Does that make sense?
Well, it not only makes sense, but it is the most critical question that we can ask. Because depending upon the answer to that question, whether this is what we refer to as an intrapersonal need, that is a need that I am responsible for fulfilling within myself, or an interpersonal need, which is a need that can only be met in the context of relationship. Depending upon what we assess the nature of that need to be, we're going to respond very differently than if it were the other way around. So an example of an interpersonal need, that is one that we cannot fulfill without the participation of another person in our life, is a need for intimacy, a need for connection, a need to have some sense of togetherness, that I'm not alone, a need for external support, which we all need in various ways. We live in a culture that really kind of demonizes the whole need for dependence. And so we have created this milieu of hyper independence in which people, particularly men, are hold the belief that they should be self-made, that they shouldn't need other people, they shouldn't be dependent. Now, the thing is that we are, as human beings, we're social beings, meaning we are all interdependent. And interdependence is the third way of being, other than independence and dependence. Dependence is when you're making other people responsible for needs that you have. And then you get into what is the other dependency, which is codependency, where both people are expecting the other person to fulfill needs that they really need to be responsible for, like their own health, their own well-being, their feeling of wholeness, the results that they create in their own lives. That there's this tendency that so many of us have, is to project that responsibility onto other people, or in the case of a committed partnership, very often it's well, you're responsible for providing for my material needs, or for my financial needs, or for my feelings of being um, a good person, my feelings of self-esteem. So it really, that's kind of the way we see it breaks down, in terms of really looking at what is my responsibility. It's really an issue of responsibility more than anything else. And what is it that we are co-responsible for to support each other in fulfilling some of those needs.
And what would be some examples of places where we should be looking towards each other, and that's usually a positive thing, as opposed to areas where we need to be looking within?
Well, when Charlie was mentioning to the interpersonal needs, there's some needs that really can only be met by connection with our partner. Sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy are cornerstones of well-being of happy couples. If they've got that going for them, they can have differences in other areas. They can be autonomous, they can have a lot of well-being, but there has to be a basic connection that works for them. And if one person is feeling deprived in the area of emotional or sexual intimacy, how they bring it to their partner's attention means everything. Because we're very easily shamed in these tender areas. And to acknowledge what is working and to sandwich that in the middle, and what would be even better if, and to sandwich on the other side the appreciation and the gratitude and the accent on what is working, but there's some calibration that needs to be done. A little bit different in this, a little bit more frequent in that. And when we do it, to do it in a graceful way, not in a way that the other person feels backed up or clobbered or accused or criticized. And we call this appealing to our partner's enlightened self-interest. This would be really important to me if you would listen to me about how essential and important this is. I know that we're going to feel closer, we're going to be in harmony, we're going to be on the same page, and I think we're both going to be so much happier. So it's finding that common ground and that common denominator, and to become artful in the way in which we negotiate for our needs, and enroll and enlist the support and cooperation of our partner.
So emotional and sexual intimacy are great places to look for help from your partner, right? That's kind of well established here. What is an area that is commonly displayed as codependency that's going to create negative emotions and an unhealthy balance in the relationship if we're trying to seek something from our partner in this particular area?
Well, there's an awful lot of needs, and I want to just say a little bit in a moment about how we define the word needs, because it's very distinct from desires and wants. But there are a lot of needs that we have that are commonly viewed as the responsibility of another person. That it's very often that we will project a responsibility for fulfilling some of these needs onto other people, and then feel disappointed, hurt, angry, resentful when they don't fulfill them. and we often don't express those feelings directly, which causes them to kind of go underground and create a divide in the relationship. But I want to just mention some of these needs that we have the responsibility for fulfilling on our own or interdependently, rather than projecting that responsibility on another person. And you'll be able to see, and I think hopefully the listeners will be able to recognize whether they take responsibility for these needs themselves or whether they have the expectation that somebody else should fulfill them. So I want to, first of all, start with our physical needs, which is the needs for sustenance. That we have our physical needs met to survive: food, water, shelter, protection. That's our responsibility. It doesn't mean, and this is an important point, that we alone have to provide that, but we're responsible for seeing to it that we have the security and that we are provided with the things that we need in order to flourish, in order to feel a high sense of well-being and fulfillment in our lives. Another one is related to that is the need for rest, relaxation, and rejuvenation. Now, when most of us think of our health, we think of two things: diet and exercise. But rest and relaxation and adequate sleep have been scientifically, through a lot of research, demonstrated that they are as important as food and exercise. So we're responsible for seeing to it that we get that. The need for safety, security, and protection. That's our responsibility. Doesn't mean, again, that we do that all by ourselves. We can do it in cooperation with another person. But the point that we're trying to make here is not to project that responsibility onto your partner if you are in a committed partnership, but to accept the responsibility for at least participating in that process where we provide this together. Another one is the need for community and connection. Community and connection absolutely involves other people, but we are responsible for participating in our lives in a way that is going to make that more likely for people to be predisposed to want to be in community with us. What kind of a person do I have to be in order to be attractive to other people who would want to, connect with me in that way? Another one is the need for play. Play is not just for kids. Adults need to play, to have time that is specific to just being in the pleasure of the experience itself with no object other than enjoyment. The need for creative expression. That's another one. The need to have purpose and meaning in our lives. These are all responsibilities that we have. The need for learning, growth, and challenge. And of course, the need for love. And it's not just the need to receive love. It's the need to be in loving relationships with people where there's reciprocity, where there's mutuality. How do I need to be as a person in order for me to be a compelling, attractive invitation to people who will want to be with me? So these are some of the things that people often project at least some responsibility onto their partner to provide, and when they don't, rather than step up to the plate themselves, they can get resentful.
And you asked about codependence. And as you can see, these needs that we all have, most of them can be met independently, that we don't need our partner to bring them to us on a tray. But codependents have an expectation that their partner is going to provide their happiness and their well-being and the feeling of safety. And even things like play and challenge and friendship with other people and meaning. So it's moving on the continuum to taking a high level of responsibility, When both people in the partnership are doing that, then they're not having excessive expectation of the other person. Of course, we want the giving and the receiving of physical and emotional love to be present in the relationship, but so much of our well-being comes from outside the relationship, and it's important to preserve the well-being of the relationship by not overtaxing it and expecting so much of it that it squeezes the life out of it. And that's what codependents are doing. Codependents are too heavily invested in the relationship doing it for them rather than strengthening themselves to take responsibility for their own lives as an individual. So that's a piece of work for all of us to keep our eye peeled about when we may be expecting so much more without bringing the level of responsibility, intentionality, and commitment to take good care of ourselves and bring our happy selves to the partnership.
Maybe there's somebody who's listening right now who is codependent with their partner and they're not aware of it. What kind of questions could a listener ask themselves to figure out if they're in that situation and how to start the dialogue to break away from that codependent relationship?
Let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Native.
Native creates safe, simple, effective deodorants that smell amazing and actually work. Chase and I live in a very hot and humid climate, so we need something that will keep us dry all day long and smell good. And I love smelling like their coconut and vanilla smell that they have all day. It smells so nice.
Yeah, it's better than my natural body odor for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And another bonus is Native's clean and simple ingredients allow you to know exactly what's in your deodorant.
Now that we know that aluminum may be linked to some serious health ramifications, including breast cancer and Alzheimer's, it's totally worth making the switch from conventional deodorants that contain aluminum to Native's aluminum-free deodorant.
And it's not only us that loves Native. They have over 8,000 five-star reviews and have been showcased on the Today Show, Women's Health, Good Morning America, Pop Sugar, and more.
Try it risk-free with free returns and exchanges in the U.S. For 20% off your first purchase, visit nativedeodorant.com and use the promo code IDO during checkout. That's nativedeodorant.com. Use the promo code IDO during checkout. Today's episode is also brought to you by our course, Spark My Relationship.
You're listening to the podcast, so you probably want to create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner. And if you can do it in less than 90 days, even better. We say it all the time on the show. A mediocre relationship is easy, but a passionate, authentic, and satisfying relationship takes work. It doesn't just happen on its own. And that's why Sarah really did all the heavy lifting on this.
And you
created this course with the therapists that we've had on the show to really help you with the specific tools, exercises needed to create the lasting and positive improvements rather than just listening to the show and not really implementing them. This is a great way to have some accountability in a structured format to put the tools that we talk about on the show into practice.
You can do this in 90 days. You can do it from home, and it is self-paced. So it is perfect for turning up the heat in your relationship, having some fun together, and really revolutionizing your intimacy and communication. And like Chase mentioned before, we've worked with 15 psychologists and therapists to bring you the strategies that marriage therapists teach their clients. And just some of those strategies are how to eliminate unhelpful old habits, develop mindful awareness to help improve stress management, learn healthy and successful communication tools, create a deeper, more intimate bond, and strengthen your couple microculture and future together. So for our listeners only, we are offering a special promo for the course. You can find it at sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and you can access a special pricing just for you guys. So again, check out sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock for your special promo.
Check it out. Don't waste any more time. Do it.
There are a few things that are really clear indicators about whether you're on the codependent end of the spectrum. One that is the chief indicator is that you're fuzzy about your boundaries. Do you know that you don't have a clear sense of what works for you or doesn't, or if you know what's clear, that you don't take a stand about it and say this works for me and this doesn't? They have trouble saying no. No, I don't really want to do this now. No, I don't want to go to that restaurant. No, that wouldn't work for me. To have your brother move in with us. Do you know that they don't stand up for themselves enough? And that's related to the issue of self-esteem, that their feelings of self-worth and their self-esteem hasn't really been developed enough yet to feel worthy to declare what will work and not work for them. That's why their boundaries are so hazy and so permeable in a not good way. And so if you notice that you have the earmarks of a codependent partnership, that you're not drawing the clear boundaries and you're ending up feeling resentful, you're ending up feeling taken advantage of or exploited or ignored, that your needs are not being listened to and met, that would be the indicator that you need to do some work with somebody who's a little farther along the path than you are. Because there's a lot of people who've done a lot of good work with it, and not just, you could maybe go to clergy, you maybe have a family relative who could help you with it, and to help you with your boundaries and to help build up your self-esteem. And you have to earn your way into graduating out of codependence.
If someone listening feels like their partner is the codependent partner, how can they bring it up with them to move forward in solving these issues?
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a relationship with only one codependent person in it. Codependence is an interactive process that requires participation on both sides. If one person is overly dependent and the other person is enabling them to be dependent upon them, and there are certain advantages that we can get on either side of that equation from being the one who our partner turns to whenever they need any kind of help rather than turning more to themselves. And there are advantages to being on the other side, where you don't have to be the one to figure out how to do things and to get the job done, because you can always turn it over to the other person. And when both people begin to see that they have been colluding in certain ways to co-create this codependent relationship, and then they begin to see what it's costing them personally to indulge in this desire to be an enabler or to be overly dependent upon the other person, that there are real serious consequences to being in that kind of a relationship in terms of your level of well-being, in terms of your level of resentment that can be accumulated. Because whenever somebody is overly dependent upon another person, there's almost always a certain degree of resentment in that. We often tend to resent the person who holds that kind of power over us. And the person who is the one to whom that responsibility is projected and expected, no matter how caring and loving they are, we all have our limits. And at some point, they're inevitably going to begin to feel tired, used, resentful, and that's going to come out in various, usually indirect ways. So when people begin to see that, hey, we have co-created this system, it seemed to be working pretty well for a while, but it ain't working so good now. And I don't like what it is bringing out in each one of us here. When both people see that, then it becomes much more possible to acknowledge that we have a challenge here and we need to do some work here on ourselves. It's not so much we need to work on the relationship. It's more that we need to do the work that each one of us needs to do in order to balance our own dependent needs and interdependent needs within ourselves. We need to do that, and that will automatically shift the balance in the relationship.
So once a couple has established that they are codependent and they're willing to put in the work to develop and nurture other relationships to help satisfy their needs, I'm sure at that point a lot of boundaries or discussions or things will need to be put in place now that the dynamic will be really completely different. Do you have any advice for people at that position of the relationship?
Yes, we often encourage couples to have regular check-ins. When you're in transition, so many feelings are going to come up. When a person has been in a more closed system and then you start getting in a men's group and a women's group and you're spending time with other people and the system is starting to open up, there's often a feeling of threat, jealousy. You know, maybe she's going to fall in love with somebody else. Maybe he's going to, fall in love with somebody else. I might get left. And maybe they're going to get some ideas from somebody else that could be threatening to what we have. And so we always encourage people to check in regularly and in a very responsible way, not in an accusatory way, to speak about their own tender feelings, their own fears, their own jealousies, their own pain. And when they spend time with each other without answering the phone, without the TV on, turn off the tablets and the computers and don't let yourself be distracted. You're meeting with each other for the intention of connecting. And you check in with yourself. How am I feeling? What's going on with me? And you report out in a responsible way. You don't act out. If you're irritated or resentful or angry at the partner, you don't try to get them to change back to when you felt more secure. The relationship is going to go through some growing pains. And I always tell people once a week is minimal. Every day is not too much when you're making modifications and remodeling your relationship, because it's going to bring up some uncomfortable feelings. And for you two to be aware of what's going on in you and to outflow about that, and to be aware of what's going on with your partner. They maybe have different fears than you have, but that you can soothe each other while you're transitioning into having a bigger, fuller, richer life.
I love that you gave the example or that you mentioned that talking every day is not too much, because so often when you're going through these big changes, you want to talk about them. And if you can't, you can kind of feel like your feelings are being repressed, and that can negatively affect the relationship. So I love that you mentioned that, because that's something that Jason and I try to do, and hopefully our listeners will try that as well.
Yeah. Don't underestimate the power and the value of checking in on a frequent basis. And it doesn't have to be anything really elaborate or time consuming. It's basically just like Linda said, checking in to yourself, first of all, say, where am I? What's my mood right now? What's up for me? What's in my thoughts? What kind of feelings am I having right now? Just kind of being aware of what's there, and then honestly, without filtering or censoring it, just letting your partner know. And a check-in primarily is really just looking within yourself to see who's showing up right now and what's showing up right now, and then giving that information to your partner. And that is basically the source and the foundation of true intimacy.
And 5 or 10 minutes can go a long way.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an hour or more.
No.
Sometimes people are afraid to have check-ins because they think they're going to get into a big rigmarole, and it's going to be very emotional, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be lengthy, and not necessarily.
Well, but
if you stay abreast of the issues.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
You may have to put more time in for a while if you've got a big backlog of incompletions of the things you haven't dealt with. But if you stay on top of them, it doesn't have to take long.
Once you clear out all of the incomplete stuff that needed to be communicated but never was, then you've got, pretty much open playing field there that doesn't require a lot of time because you've handled the stuff that has accumulated in the backlog.
If people really understood how frequent check-ins would enhance the well-being of their relationship, they wouldn't delay. They'd get right on it, and they'd make it a regular feature of their relationship, because this is what really high-functioning couples are doing. They don't let things accumulate.
The reason that most people don't check in often enough, and the reason that they choose not to, and it's not, everybody has enough time to. So that is, just forget that excuse. We're busy. We've got kids. We've got jobs. Everybody does. Everybody's got responsibilities and commitments. And yet some people who have very, very full lives manage to find the time to do it when other people whose lives don't seem to be quite as full can't do it. Just as an example, in our second book, we interviewed a couple that had 13 children. And 9 of them were still living at home. 4 of them were living outside of the home, but they were living close by. And they each had full-time careers. So I mean, you think you don't have enough time? Read chapter 9 in our book, and this couple will help you to put things in perspective, because they checked in every day.
Mm-hmm. They asked to be disguised. So when you read the story in Secrets of Great Marriages, it says they have 12 children, but they actually had 13.
Jeez.
Wow.
Well, the disguise is broken. We're going to find...
That is absolutely true.
When Charlie and I interviewed them, we interviewed them in person. And when we left after the interview, we looked at each other. We said, we will never, ever say that we don't have enough time to devote to our relationship again.
And that was 10 years ago. And you know what? I haven't said it since.
Well, that is a great way to wrap up. And some great homework for Sarah and I and our listeners is when something's really important, we make the time for it. So unless you got 14 kids, then send us a message. But
we'll give you a pass if you have 14 kids.
At 13 and under, you can get it done. And it is important, and it's not easy to do, but anything in life, I believe, that is worthwhile, it's worth taking the time. And sometimes it's a little bit hard in the moment, but in the long run, it's going to be a great thing for your overall happiness in your relationship. So thank you so much, Charlie and Linda, for coming back on the show. Let's wrap up with having you tell our listeners where they can find you online, your latest book, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yes, if they go to www.bloomwork.com, that's singular. It's not Bloomworks. It's bloomwork.com. And they will find us with a bunch of videos. We have Facebook Live. We have YouTube videos. And they can get a lot of free material on our site that will enhance their relationships. And a bunch of it is on emotional intimacy and recovery, breakthrough from codependent patterns. And we love it when people get on our email list. We send out a newsletter once a month. It's a booster shot of inspiration for how to make their relationships as best as they can possibly be.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have the link to your website on idopodcast.com as well as on the podcast episode description. And again, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It was a wonderful interview, and thanks again.
Well, we're glad to be here. And you asked about our most recent book, and book number 4 was That Which Doesn't Kill Us, How One Couple Became Stronger at the Broken Places, which is our memoir. And our new book that will be out next year is going to be on conflict management. So thank you for inviting us. Had a good time.
Hi guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, all the links are in the show notes page as well as on the podcast description. And while you're on our website, we encourage you guys to check out our 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. We send you an email for 14 days with simple, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And on our website, we also have a bunch of free resources for your relationship. So we encourage you to check those out. We also have our Love Tribe on Facebook. We encourage you guys to join the tribe and be there for support for each other. If you have questions or just need some relationship advice, we are all here for each other. The group has grown to almost 1,000 people, and we love it. So we hope you guys join that. You can go to Facebook, Love Tribe Fam, and you'll find us right there. And if you are interested in learning more about our flagship course, Spark My Relationship, we hope you guys check it out. We have a special offer that is only for podcast listeners. So you can go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and you can unlock that special offer and learn more. As always, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.